Good morning, WBC family. My name is John Wilson. I work with the worship team in the media booth there at church, and I just wanted to share a message with you this morning that really spoke to me in a devotion that I'm doing on James this week. So I call it Called to Action. And James starts off in chapter 1 in verse 2 talking about joy in trials. Consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds. Now, that's not a natural response that we think when we're going through trials. And God's way is never a natural way to what the world says is natural reaction to different things. He goes on in verses 3 and 4 and says, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish the work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. So in a devotional that I'm reading right now, it talks about testing as dokumun, which is the process that precious metals go through being put into the fire so that they can become pure. And they're in so much heat to try to remove all the impurities so that the pure metal comes through. So pure that you're able to see your own image through that metal. And I think that's kind of what he's talking about here. God is putting us through these tests and trials. He's allowing Satan to tempt us so that we can prove ourselves pure and holy. That repeated process is what leads to the purification. So as Christ tests us and he puts us in the fire, it's his effort to purify us so that our reflected image is him, so pure and holy that Christ is seen in us by our choices, thoughts, and actions. He goes on in verse 12 to talk about, blessed is the man who perseveres under these trials, because when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God has promised to those who love him. Then continuing on in verse 13 and 14, he talks about the difference between testing and then the trials and temptations. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me, for God cannot tempt, nor can he be tempted by anyone. But each one is tempted when by our own evil desires he is dragged away and enticed. So God will test us and he will allow Satan to tempt us. Giving in to that leads to sin, and then that sin ultimately leads to death. So jumping on down to verses 22 through 25, he says, do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do it is like a man who looks at his face in the mirror and then after looking walks away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But the man who looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues to do this, not forgetting what he has heard but doing it, he will be blessed in what he does. So I think he's saying that we need to have less talk and more action. Don't be a hearer only. I went to church today. Check. I did my Bible study. Check. Be careful not to make your personal relationship with God a checklist. Be doers, obedient to the truths in God's word. Take action on the truths that we hear and know. Obedience to his word is what God truly desires from us. Have a great day.